gonna kind of spin this and put it up like that. We'll be able to change the valve cover gasket, and then we have space to put our cam blocks on. What I'm gonna do quickly is actually just inspect the camshafts here since we have it open, make sure everything's nice and clean. We're not throwing any codes on this cylinder head, but it doesn't hurt to check things out. So I'm just gonna be looking at the lobes of the camshafts, making sure I don't see any sensitive damage. There's a little bit of debris here. I can just pick it up with my finger and drop it out. You'll always have a little bit of debris fall in. Clean it up the best you can. Yeah, these look fine. All right, so we're about ready to start removing on this cylinder head the cam bridge and the gears and sprockets. So before we do that, we're gonna put our cam blocks on. And in order to do that, we're gonna have to put our motor into top dead center. I'll show you guys how to do that. So we're gonna go to the harmonic balancer and install our square drive adapter. This isn't something I can really see. I have to feel, so I'm feeling that it's in. I'll show you guys the mirror. That's what the square drive looks like in place. All right, and then I'm gonna grab a 24mm socket and put it on my square drive. And now I'm gonna grab a ratchet and we're gonna try to put this on. Hopefully we have the room. If not, we'll have to get a short socket, 24mm, which looks like we're gonna have to do. So let me grab that. All right, so it just fell out. It kind of doesn't like sit in there great on its own, so it needs a little bit of support, but we just got a 24mm on a shorter socket. Okay, and now we're gonna turn the motor to the right or the left if you're inside the car. Basically, to the driver's side, that's the rotation of the motor. You don't really ever want to turn the motor the other way. Again, it's really not that great of a connection. I'm not too into those square drives. Okay, and now we're just gonna turn the camshafts by turning the crank until we get to the spot we need them to be in. Top dead center. This is actually pretty difficult with this adapter. You kind of need to hold it like this while you do it. It helps if you take the spark plugs out because it's gonna alleviate some of that compression that we're fighting, but I don't want to take the spark plugs out. I'm just gonna fight it. You can hear the compression moving around. If you look right around here, we know we're in top dead center because on the camshaft, you have some threads right here and then again over here. And then on the opposite head, you do the same thing. And this is what we're looking for. Thread right there, that's where our cam block's gonna go into, and then up here. So between the two cylinder heads, that's how we're gonna fit it. Again, if you're just tuning in on this video, you look at this lobe on the camshaft, something happened with this rocker arm and it burned our camshaft. So we are replacing camshaft because of the intake valve on cylinder 2. So I'm pretty loyal to CTA when it comes to toolkits for engines. I have tons of toolkits for all sorts of engines and they've never done me wrong. So this is CTA part number 2871 and this is what they look like. And these are our camshaft locks. Basically it's just gonna leave our in top dead center. So the cam blocks are gonna be installed like this. This one's to the right, this one's for the left. As you can see, this one's a little higher up and this one's lower. I'm gonna put the passenger side one in first. And the way we're gonna do that is by just lining it up and kind of getting our threads to catch. If it's lined up perfectly in the beginning, then the threads should catch. If the threads don't catch, then you don't have it lined up properly. So go move the engine on the bottom and you're not like perfectly in top dead center. But it looks like I actually got it the first try. So now they're 13mm and I believe they're supposed to be torqued to 25 Newton meters. So with this, we're gonna actually care about the torque spec. So I'm gonna go grab my 13mm 3/8 drive and my 3/8 torque wrench and torque it to 25 Newton meters. All right, so my torque wrench, 13mm 3/8 drive. It's 24.8. The other one. Okay, so we're just gonna leave that one alone, and we're done on this side for the cylinder head. We're gonna go over here now and install our other cam block. This one's a little different. It seems to be a little bit longer for the front piece, but that's the only thing that's really different about it. Put that one in a little bit too much before bringing this one all the way down, because they'll bind if you torque them one down more than the other. So it helps if you keep one loose. Don't put one all the way down like I just did. You're not going to be able to have the room to wiggle the tool. So grab my 13mm. Okay. Bind it up a little bit. And afterwards, we're just gonna double check that we have them in nicely. Starting to see against the head there. So 25 newton meters. Torque is actually going down. Not sure why. It's a camshaft. This is the one we're replacing anyways. So I'll just double check. It feels tight. That one's all the way tight. Okay, that's 25. Really, this one's losing torque. And I'm not sure why. So what I'm gonna do is remove it and make sure the threads aren't messed up before we continue, because I want to make sure that this tool is in properly, because we're going to use it to counter hold our sprockets in the back. So I'm just going to inspect the threads. This one that was doing it, and it seems fine here, and it also looks fine in there, which is very strange. So let me just double check. Yeah, I don't see an issue with the threads, so maybe it was just not seated properly. Try to maybe reinstall it, and we'll see if that does anything for it. Well, weirdly enough, that is the camshaft we are going to be replacing. This one goes right to 25 and stops. Something's up with that. I'm not entirely sure I can figure out what right now. Yeah, I'm losing torque. So something is definitely wrong with that. So what I'm gonna do is, at this point, I'm gonna leave it there. I mean, the block is in place and it's still on the threads. It should be 25 newton meters, but I'm just gonna take the risk at this point and continue on. What I'm gonna do now is, now that I got both these cam locks in place, also, that's a good thing that we have the other one in place. Now knowing that that one's a little messed up for some reason. Could be because that camshaft was overheated. Maybe something's up with the threads. So what I'm gonna do is, we were talking about it earlier, about that pin that we have to put through our timing tensioner. So you're gonna have to find a way to kind of press a screwdriver up against the side of the chain right there and put some tension on that piston so we can put a pin right through that upper guide rail. Try to set the camera up, or the mirror up in a spot where you guys will be able to see it. So I took a screwdriver that fits into the hole of the guide rail, and basically if you look, there's that hole right above the guide rail. That's what's gonna relieve our tension. So the left, there's the piston right there that needs to be compressed. It's a hydraulic piston that's on a spring. So we're gonna put a screwdriver pretty much right underneath the piston and pry up. And while we do that, we're gonna slide that screwdriver into the second hole, and that's gonna relieve our tension on our timing chain. All right, so here we're looking at the back of the tensioner, and right there where it says SK, that's the screwdriver actually of going through the guide rail and with the piston compressed. So right now the chain has the tension off of it, so we can start removing these larger bolts on our cam gears. So they're on both of the cam gears. And before we do that, we're gonna actually take paint and we're gonna mark our locations so we make sure everything goes back the same way we took it apart. All right, so in the shop, I just use nail polish for paint. So what I'm gonna do is, I'm gonna mark a tooth on the gear for the sprocket. I'm gonna mark its correlation on the chain. I'm gonna mark it equal on the cam adjuster. And then I'm going to mark all of that to the cam girdle. And then for a bit of a safety measure, just in case this paint doesn't hold up when we're screwing around with things, I'm also gonna do this again on another tooth with a Sharpie as a backup. And then we also have to do the exhaust cam. All right, it's not anything specific about which one, we just want to make sure everything matches up and put it back together. So again, chain link, the tooth on the sprocket, and then this one does not have a cam adjuster on the exhaust valve or exhaust camshaft. So I'm gonna mark it where it meets on cam girdle, something like that. Okay, and now we're gonna grab a Sharpie and do another tooth on both ones. All right, I have a Sharpie that works on oily surfaces, so we're just gonna double make sure that we have things lined up on both of these. The only reason I'm doing this is just because there's oil back here, and I want to make sure I'm definitely lining this up because I'm not using a crankshaft lock, so this is just this added security measure for me. So at this point, I'm going to loosen my sprockets and the cam adjuster. All right, so I have an M14 triple square on a 1/2-inch ratchet. I have a big one because technically this is all supposed to be counter held. So there's a tool that you actually put into either the sprockets or the cam adjuster, and it just takes some of that tension off for when you do breakaway torque. But the cam lock is here, and with a big enough bar and some even pressure, we should be all right. But that's up to you if you want to do what I'm doing, or if you want to buy the proper tools. There are tools available to do this properly. So I'm gonna first break free the cam adjuster. Allowed by something like 80 Newton meters. It's not the hardest thing in the world, but definitely a decent amount of torque. And since it's a triple square, you just want to make sure you're evenly unloading the load. So right when it stops being hard, we're gonna leave it alone. And now we're gonna go do the exhaust side. Okay, there we go. Make sure it's fully seated. This one's gonna be a bit of a pain. I have to put it in that position to kind of pull from. It's a little bit too much to try to brake by pushing. There we go. All right, and you can see right here, the chain is out of tension, so we're all right. What I'm gonna do now, start by removing the cam adjuster. If you look right here, this is the most important thing for reassembling. I might have you come to the front, Justin, for this. There's a window cut here. I'm not sure if you guys can see this. There's a little window cut in this cover. So if you see, there's a nice even machining, and then right here, the slit. And if you look at the cam adjuster, there's a notch. This is how you make sure that you're lined up properly. As long as that line is here, you're all right. And then same thing on the other side. Might not be able to see this, but there should be another marking down there. But those plus our markings here, as long as we reassemble and it looks like that, we know we're all right. So what I'm gonna do now, see, I just smudged that. So that's why it's important to do multiple markings. So you don't ruin everything. So I'm taking out the bolt for my intake cam adjuster. It should be a longer one. And before I remove things, here's your window. There's the slit in the cam adjuster. I believe this cam adjuster actually comes off with the gear, so it should be one unit. So we're gonna leave that alone, and we're gonna remove the bolt off of the passenger side now, or exhaust cam rather. Okay, I dropped mine, but I think it fell all the way through. So this is the intake cam and this is the exhaust cam. If you look, the threads are generally the same length, so that's how much it goes into the camshaft. But here you have the space for where it goes to the cam adjuster, so that's the difference. If you have two cam adjusters, it's gonna look like this. If no cam adjusters, I don't know if that's a thing, but they'll probably look like this. So now that that's done, we are okay to remove our cam gears. And the way we're gonna do that is by evenly kind of picking them off. So I'm gonna pull, they're kind of doweled into place. So I'm gonna try to get them out together and then we can slide our chain off both of them. Again, I don't wanna mess with my paint markings too much, which I did not. I can also redo them once I have them off the car. So I'm actually gonna probably drop the intake one first, if possible. I can just get the passenger side one a little out of its spot. I might be able to pull these all together. Okay, there we go. So I just kind of pried it gently, very gently from the back. And here we have our exhaust side. As you can see, there's these 3 dowels in there. And then these 4 holes are for the counter holding tool if you decide to use it. And then what I'm gonna do is, see my black marking and my green marking? I'm gonna clean this up and I'm gonna make those markings much more visible so that I don't lose them. And then now I'm gonna grab my cam adjuster and we're just gonna let the chain sit down. That's what the cam adjuster looks like. It has again 3 holes here and then another counter holding tool, separate different one that goes here. So at this point, the camshafts are not under any load. So what we can do is release the cam girdle. This tool doesn't interfere at all with removing the cam girdle. So I'm probably gonna leave it in place just to make sure nothing happens until I have the load taken off. I'm not sure if that's the procedure by any means, but that's kind of what I'm gonna do to feel most comfortable. Just gonna double check to make sure there's nothing back here. What you can do is take the chain and let it kind of sit on the intake cam until we get back there. I don't think that the chain has the ability to fall all the way down, so there's not much concern there. But at this point, we're gonna remove the cam girdle and take it from there. All right, so I have the cam adjuster now. Before we move on, this is something that I think can get messed up and cause you some anxiety later. and from my own mistakes in the past, I've learned to do this. So even though I marked them in the car, I'm gonna clean up everything now that I can actually remove the oil and make it a little bit easier for me to work on. Looks like my paint is actually holding on. So I know that the next tooth over is what I did the Sharpie with. I have the Sharpie now, and I'm just gonna color in this entire tooth so that's more visible in there. And then we're gonna match that tooth over here. And now we have two markings that are nice and visible. And even with the paint, now since we're gonna be kind of away from this for a while, I'm gonna go and repaint this tooth all the way down. And it's just gonna be nice and easy for us to figure this out later. I'm gonna do the same thing on this gear as well. And I'm gonna bring the paint out to the side so it's not just on the teeth. Okay, so now we can just let the gear go sit somewhere else for now. And I'm gonna grab the sprocket now, clean up the sprocket. This one I'm gonna be a little bit more careful with because I barely even have markings left on this. So I'm gonna just clean this little side here. And you can see I have a little bit of green and a little bit of black there. So once I have one, I'll be able to clean the other one. That's my black one. Now I'm gonna clean the whole gear. The biggest thing when it comes to timing for me is just the anxiety of what if something happens. It's not like anything actually can happen. We're not really messing with stuff other than once the tension's off the chain, there's no risk of spinning camshafts because they're not under load. But it's just one of those things where you'd rather be safe than sorry, especially on engines that you haven't worked on. This is my first time working on this engine, so it's a lot easier than first imagined, but I still want to make sure that I'm not gonna put the car back together in the incorrect time. So this is a good security measure. Save yourself some stress. So remark these, I'm gonna put it away, and there's absolutely no way we can mess up putting this motor back together now. So here we have some things highlighted for the service procedure, and this is for the frame. They call it the ladder frame, and this is the sequence for dismantling. So we're gonna start in the middle and work our way out. So in the middle, vertically and longitudinally, we're gonna go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, which this looks like it's actually the driver's side head. So we might not even have 21 on this one. So I think we're skipping those two. So it should be 19. So as we go, we'll try to figure that out. But I'm gonna start by doing the exact opposite. So if you look on this one, it looked like this is the back of the head, this is the front of the head where the vacuum pump is. So one is on the top. So we're gonna start with this one for this head. And we're gonna just break them free. These are torque to yield. So we'll do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, and 19 is all the way back here. Okay, so that's the first step of removing them. And now what we're gonna do is, okay, so that's all right. So it's gonna be a 3-step install, but it's gonna be a 1-step removal. So just breaking them free and then just follow in the same order that you removed, or that you broke them free to remove them. This is a good practice. This is what they look like, by the way. And they're torque to yield, so they're one-time use. Definitely buy these and replace them. You don't have to mark the camshafts because they only go one way. We're gonna be putting this bracket back in after, so it kind of makes it foolproof installation because the 2 bolts that go into the camshafts make them go up. All right, so before I go and actually remove this, I'm gonna see if I can remove the camshafts with this on and the ladder frame, cam girdle, whatever you wanna call it, all kind of in the same shot. I'm gonna grab the exhaust cam in front of the ladder frame and give it a little bit of a pull, and it doesn't seem like it wants to give up. I have to find a place to kind of pry. I also don't want to really pry in all these open spaces because it's an aluminum ladder frame. So probably what I'll do is remove this guy. So I can take the pry bar, and it seems like there's a spot here I can kind of go against the supercharger. All right. And what you just heard in the back was actually the chain falling off of the intake camshaft. So now I'm gonna see if I can, oh, if you look right here, there's a ground cable of some sort that we missed. So that's the last thing we're gonna remove here. I think it's also a T30, so will that be all right? Yeah, it is. Okay, almost missed that. So I think you can remove this all as one assembly, which is pretty cool. So, that being said, we're gonna give it a little, I think I gotta pull it back this way a bit. All right. And there we go, our ladder frame and our camshafts. So one we're going to be replacing is this one here. And again, it's because of this damage done to this lobe right there. I'm going to flip it over now. Again, you can see there's some significant damage there. So it looks like this is the better way to do it. We're going to put it together in the ladder frame and then install it. Obviously, it kind of wants to fall out the back, so just keep your hands there. So yeah. All right, so we're gonna start inspecting things, and as you can see, that roller rocker is significantly chewed up. I'm surprised it still moves. Honestly, I thought that's what probably happened, was that it ceased. So I'm gonna try to look around and see if I can diagnose what started it. But if you look, you can see they all kind of have a little bit of wear. So what I did is I bought all 12 roller rockers and also 12 lifters for them. So pretty sure you can kind of just pull them out, which is exactly what just happened. So the little lifters are just plugged in with a little clip on the roller rockers, and we're gonna just pull them all out, assemble 12 new ones, and put them in. All right, so I went ahead and removed all of the hydraulic lifters and our roller rockers on our intake camshaft. Cylinder 2, the second one in, is the one that failed on us, and this is why. If you look, you can see the damage done. It's pretty significant all the way around, and then once you get to this point here, it is just absolutely destroyed. So the reason that this happened is because there's a little porthole right there. I don't know if you guys can see it on this camera. Right there, there's a little hole, and that's where the lifter is lubricated. And when you pull the clip out, there's a little oiler here on the top that actually sprays up in here and lubricates the roller. My assumption is at some point that little pinhole right there got clogged, and this was running for a bit without a lubrication. There was some kind of material within the motor that got caught in between this piece here and destroyed this piece, and once this piece wasn't lubricated, got hot, expanded, and then did our damage to our camshaft. So I do believe this is an isolated kind of fluke incident. If you look back at the cylinder head, you can see on the intake side of things, there are various holes that we just pulled our hydraulic lifters out of, and they're all connected. There actually is like a casted tube that is our oil supplier for these throughout the whole thing. And since this is somewhere in the middle, if there was some kind of catastrophic failure or something blocking it, I think it would be on more than one cylinder that we had a failure. Also, this failure happened a significant time ago, and there was a decent amount of driving done afterwards, not immediately after. So I think what happened was the damage was done, the car was turned off, it was cooled, and then once the car was started again, there wasn't that tolerance to fully open the valve anymore, but also there was no heat to have these two expanded pieces of metal making the contact that they should to actually cause more damage. So I think that's why the engine's not in a catastrophic failure, and I'm pretty convinced at this point that all we're gonna do is replace the roller rocker, replace the camshaft, and the engine's gonna be fine. These portholes are connected, like I'm saying. So I didn't want to pull the spark plugs earlier, but now thinking about it, I'm going to pull the spark plugs before we actually start the car, just so I can prime the oil pressure into these roller rockers so we're not immediately putting metal to metal all over again. So I'm gonna just continue now by showing you guys the removal of all of the ones on the exhaust cam. It's super simple. So if you pull them equally and not at an angle, then you can just kind of pull out the whole thing as an assembly. If you pull them kind of tight, you're gonna leave the lifter behind, and then you're just gonna pull the rocker. So you can kind of just feel it out. It's just the way that it wants to come out, just follow that whole thing, and you should be all right. So I'm gonna try to show you guys without my hand blocking it. Literally just straight out. They're very easy to come out. I'm gonna put it back in, let me show you. So like that, and just straight out. You might not be able to see it clearly, but you can kind of get the gist. And again, the only reason I'm replacing all of these is because there was a failure in this head, and they're not that expensive, so this is just one of those rather safe than sorry while we're in here kind of things. Only other thing I'm gonna address, aside from the sealant that we obviously have to remove on the whole cylinder head, is this little blind plug up front. And we just kind of bend it out of place. And you can buy a new one of these if you want. We're gonna actually just reseal ours. So just clean it and reseal it and put it back with some RTV. And you can also decide when you want to do that. So that being said, I think at this point, what we're gonna do is clean up the head a little bit, put some rags in between, take off some of this very large RTV that we have laying around. And then at that point, I'm gonna quickly go over it with a little bristle disc and just clean up some of this deep groove stuff, because there is almost like a hash mark machining to this surface. It's not like a clean machine surface. So I don't want to put new sealant down over old sealant, because that will create a place where I can actually leak oil. So we're gonna clean it up to bare metal with a wire disc and just kind of cover things out, clean it up one more time afterwards, and then we're gonna be safe to reassemble. All right, so I'm gonna fold up some rags and fit them nicely in between these 4 channels and kind of make it so that they're not popping up at any point higher than deck surface. That can be a little close in these outer ones because they're tight. These are clean rags, don't use dirty rags. Like that. And that's gonna just keep anything that we take off now from falling into the head. I have a little scraper tool here. I have it broken on a little angle so I can use it a little easier. And I have a plastic razor blade. We start at the back of the head, and just like any other razor blade, we're gonna kind of scrape to get all this RTV off. Be careful in the back of the head because your timing stuff is under there. And then once you get to these bigger chunks, it should be smooth sailing. See, that's what I was talking about with the rags. So it kind of gives you a place to pick it up. I'm just gonna go across the cylinder head. Try to get these chunks off. So, there's another one on the outside. This little hole here falls in between the supercharger and the valve cover, so if something falls into there, so there's one here, one here. And next we have the ones in the center. These big ones back here, these look like O-rings, they're actually not. That's RTV. Plow those off. And now we're going to the right side, his head, or left, the way we're looking at it. And that's a pretty big bead. I'm not too concerned about grasping this one. Also, it's kind of falling off of the side of the head, so if it falls, it falls. Pretty large piece there. Piece there. Outer seal. So it's just a way when you lay the RTV that it has a thin seal in between and then 2 thicker beads on the inside and outside, because it's actually pushing them out. There's a little lip too, groove. Side of the head, not completely flat. Up front, pick off whatever I can, send it down under the car, the little tiny pieces. Okay, another bigger piece. Okay, now with the smaller dusty stuff, I'm just gonna kind of scrape it and let it fall to the rags. Okay, now it's up to you if you want to vacuum it or blow it. I prefer to blow it out so that I'm not sucking up the rags and potentially making it worse. But before I do that, I'm gonna now clean the surface down with a bristle disc. I'm gonna grab and get my air line quick. All right, so I have an air tool with a bristle disc on it. I'm just gonna go across the cylinder head here, and here, 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 down the back however I can, and we're just gonna clean off the rest of the remaining RTV, and then we're just gonna blow it out of the cylinder head. So I'm gonna connect it to my airline. It's gonna be very gentle. I'm gonna take my air pistol now and start lightly. I don't know if you guys saw at one point I kind of hit this insulator over here, so I'm just gonna make sure it's kind of back where it's supposed to be. Don't hit that. It's made a ton of dust for no reason. Alright, so now I'm gonna kind of pick this up and aggressively move it away so that anything that else is caught doesn't end up back in the head. One more quick cleaning along the sides. It's not going to do much of anything for anywhere that there's still oil. That's pretty much how you keep it clean for the most part. What I'm going to do next is take another clean rag and fold it up, and then I'm going to grab some brake parts cleaner. Couple sprays on the rag, rub it in the rag so it doesn't, make a ton of liquid. And we're just gonna go over that entire surface and clean up anything else. And again, this is kind of peeling on me now, so I'm gonna kind of move it away. See if there's anything with your fingernail that still grip onto. I think this is pretty safe for how well we did over here. Yeah, nothing else is coming off, so I think we're good. And then the last thing we're going to do is just kind of where that plug is, go into there. This doesn't have to be spotless, as it's going to be RTV. And just go over anywhere in the head that you choose to. But I think at this point we're fine.